Well, I'm so glad you chose to join us today. If you're watching live, be sure to jump in the chat today, say hello. We would love to connect with you. And we're jumping into part 2 of a series called Rebuilding You. If you missed part 1, you should go back and watch it. I'm really looking forward to jumping in today. But before I do, there are a couple of things that I want to remind you of. If you call Connexus your church, you're probably aware that we are in the midst of a relaunch season. We're going to be launching a brand new digital studio coming up to help us connect with people online. And we're relaunching in-person locations across Simcoe County. And there are a few dates I want to highlight for you. I'm going to put them on the screen here. The first is if you're a part of our Midland location, we're hosting a town hall at the Legion in Midland, 7 p.m. on Tuesday, August the 24th. I'm going to be there. We're going to be talking about next steps that are possible for that location. We're also, this is brand new, hosting a night of worship in Aurelia. It's outdoors at Hillside. So Hillside Bible Chapel, which is near the movie theater, at 6 p.m. There's going to be food. There's going to be stuff for kids. Of course, the band's going to be there. Everyone is welcome to join us at that outdoors in the parking lot. And then Aurelia, if you're part of our Aurelia location, relaunch September 19th. We can't wait. Digital studios coming soon. Really looking forward to it all. And a big part of making relaunch season happen is growing our volunteer teams. We needed to grow to 200 in order to get the initial doors open at our Barrie Central facility, our broadcast location. Now we need to grow that number from 200 to 400. We're more than halfway there. And so if you haven't yet signed up to say, hey, I want to be a part of a team, whether it's right now or whether it's down the road, we're asking that you would do that now. It just really helps us to plan. Obviously, it's going to take all of us to continue our mission of creating a church that unchurched people love in person and online. In fact, I just talked to somebody yesterday who was saying to me, yeah, I'm jumping in on the online chat team. She lives in Midland and she's going to be joining volunteering digitally. I know many of you are signing up to volunteer in person. In person, what we're really looking for the most, although we have lots of positions, kids ministry, student ministry, investing in the next generation. We have so many kids and we need more and more volunteers to invest in them. So I wanted to highlight that for you. It's an exciting season. It's also a different kind of season. I know we're all getting used to what it means to gather with people, and we hear about a variant and vaccines and all those things, but definitely as a society, we're in a better position than we were a year ago. And as we move forward, we're going to figure this out together. Well, we're jumping into Rebuilding You, part 2, and Rebuilding You is not a series about renovation. It's not about physical renovation. It's not about physical repairs. It's not about DIY, and I'm grateful for that because when it comes to rebuilding things, I'm not really a very handy person. In fact, whenever I try to do something around the house, sometimes it ends up looking a little bit like this. This is a shower head made out of a beer can. I didn't do this one, but it's something I could have done. Here's another one. Somebody who's done some really quick masonry here to fill this hole. I'm the type of person who really isn't super handy. In fact, whenever I go to fix something at home, often my wife, even in our first year of marriage, I remember the first week, her saying to me, are you sure you don't want to call someone to do that? Are you sure you don't want to get somebody else to do that? She doesn't seem to have confidence in my DIY skills. And true confession, I have a project at home right now in my living room that I got halfway through and I threw my hands up and said, I'm going to have to hire a contractor to finish this. It bruises my ego, but I'm not really that great when it comes to renovation, rebuilding physical things, homes, fixing my car, all those kinds of things. But that's not what this series is about. When we talk about rebuilding you, it's about fixing the brokenness in your life. And in part 1, if you haven't seen it, I asked you this question: what is broken in your life that needs fixing? What's broken in your life that needs fixing? Is it a broken relationship? Is it anxiety? Is it some sort of struggle that you're having with addiction? Is it pornography? Is it your marriage relationship? What's broken in your life that needs fixing? Because so often we walk around with parts of us broken on the inside. Or maybe for you, what's broken in your life that needs fixing are things that you see in the world around you. You see child trafficking. You see people struggling with poverty. You see an issue in another country, a social justice issue that you want to make a difference in. And you look at that and you say, man, that needs to be fixed. What's broken in your life that needs fixing? And the question we're asking is, where do you begin when it comes to rebuilding? Where do you begin when it comes to rebuilding the broken places? And we've been looking in the Bible at the account of Nehemiah. It's really a blueprint on how to rebuild things that are broken. And you know what I love the most about Nehemiah? Nehemiah is a regular guy. He's not a prophet. He's not a priest. He's not a king. He's not a superhero. Do you know what Nehemiah did for a living? He was the cupbearer to the king. Well, what does that mean? It means he would bring the king his wine, and his job was to drink the wine first, to take a sip in case it was poisonous. I mean, that is a pretty low rung on the ladder, to be the one who wants to make sure that the king doesn't get poisoned. Nehemiah was just a regular, everyday guy. But God asked him to say, hey, he put it on his heart, he broke his heart over Jerusalem. You see, what happened was the people of Babylon had captured the people of Jerusalem, the Jewish people, and then had allowed, years later, the king had allowed some of them to go back and repair things. And Nehemiah heard that the walls needed to be repaired, and he was broken over this. But God used him in an incredible way, spoiler alert, to rebuild those walls in 52 days, which is unbelievable. And what the person of Nehemiah shows us, it's not who you are, but who you trust in that makes the difference. It's not who you are, but who you trust in that makes the difference. See, Nehemiah was a regular, everyday guy that most people wouldn't even have known his name, but God used him to do incredible things. And if you're a person who would consider yourself successful, the good news is God can use you. But here's the great news. If you don't feel successful, if you feel less than, if you feel like you don't have anything to offer, time and time again in the Bible, you see that God uses people like you and like me. The disciples were described as unschooled, ordinary men who had spent time with Jesus. So how did Nehemiah go about rebuilding these walls? Well, we looked at step one last week. Rebuild step one. Let what's broken break your heart. When I ask what's broken inside of you, I challenge you to look at it right in the face and to do what Nehemiah did. See, Nehemiah sat down and he wept over what broke his heart. And I challenge you, if your marriage is broken, to sit down and just let that break your heart, to let that in. That there's power in leaning into the brokenness in your life. Maybe it's a fractured relationship with a parent, and to let that brokenness into your heart, to face it for what it is. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe you struggle with pornography. Maybe it's something in your workplace. Maybe it's something you see in the world around you that needs to be fixed, and to just not to act, because so many of us just want to act, but to sit down and do what Nehemiah did and let what's broken break your heart. And then step two, we saw a beautiful prayer from Nehemiah. We said, bring what's broken to God's heart. That's what Nehemiah did. He took the brokenness and then he said, great and awesome God, I'm bringing this to you because you promised to be in the middle of the mess. And I challenge you to submit your prayer of what's broken to God to our prayer team to text it in. And I had the opportunity to look at the prayer requests that came in, and they're confidential, of course, but to look at those and to pray over them. And truly, honestly, on my back patio, I sat there weeping over what you wrote. You were so raw and so honest. People struggling with pornography and saying, man, it's breaking my heart that I'm trapped in this, and I just want God to meet me here. I got to do something about it. People saying, I'm struggling in my marriage and I don't know how to begin the conversation. I don't know what to do, but my heart's broken and I feel like my relationship's never going to get back to where it was before. So many people who said, I have a family member who I'm disconnected from, or my family doesn't treat them well, and I'm a part of the problem. And my heart is broken for that. People who said, I don't get along with my parents and I don't know what to say. People who said, I don't get along with my teenager and I don't know what to say. So many people who said, I'm struggling with anxiety and I don't know what to do with that. I'm struggling with an addiction and now I've relapsed and my heart is broken over that. You were so honest and so real. And I want to thank you for that. Because that's the church we want to be. We want to be the kind of church that talks about real life. And others of you were saying, man, my heart's broken for kids who are stuck in isolation over the course of the pandemic and are struggling, or my heart's broken for people who are being trafficked locally here, and I want to do something about it. Something externally was breaking your heart. And as we prayed for you, it was amazing to see what happened. Right before I got up here to preach this message, somebody messaged me and said, I just want to let you know that there's been a miracle. That there's been somebody in my life, I won't go into too much detail, but there's been somebody in my life who we've been disconnected for years and years and years, and we've been praying for reconciliation. And within hours after Connexus, the prayer team prayed, this person reached out to us. And we've got hope for reconciliation. Bring what's broken to God's heart. Now, there's a group of us, and I'm included in this group, who are asking this question. Okay, I get it. Take what's broken, I look at it, now I bring it to God's heart, but now what? Because Jeff, like when do we get to the action, right? When do we get to the doing part? When do we get to the actual tangible rebuilding that I can do something about? And I get it. And today is going to be about that. It's going to be really practical, and it's about action steps that you can take. But here's the thing about recognizing your brokenness and bringing it to God. Your burden is the beginning of rebuilding. I want you to remember that. Your burden is the beginning of rebuilding. That once you see that brokenness and you bring it to God, you're ready to rebuild. It's what motivates you. And we're going to see practical steps in Nehemiah, excerpts from Nehemiah chapter 2. And this is how it starts. Nehemiah says this, early the following spring, in the month of Nisan, during the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign. Now, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to resist any dad jokes about the word Nisan, okay? So what you need to know, though, is this is an important word. See, the month of Nisan, that's 4 months after chapter 1. So in chapter 1, we see Nehemiah broken and praying, and now we pick it up 4 months later. And here's a question I have to ask. What did Nehemiah do for 4 months? He just says, hey, I'm coming to the king. It's 4 months later, and now I'm coming to talk to the king. What was he doing for the 4 months? Was he just weeping and praying? I mean, what was he actually doing? Because now what we're going to see, we're going to get a glimpse into what happens when Nehemiah stands up to do something. And when we get this glimpse, we get a glimpse into what he's been doing for the last 4 months, and it's so important. This is what he said. I was serving the king his wine, right, because he's the cupbearer, and I had never before appeared sad in his presence. I'd never worn my heart on my sleeve with the king. He says, so the king asked me, why are you looking so sad, Nehemiah? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled inside. Watch what Nehemiah said. He says, then I was terrified. But I replied. What does that mean? Then I was terrified, but I replied. See, here's why Nehemiah was terrified, because he knew he had to say something. He knew he had to speak up. In fact, he pre-decided that if the opportunity comes, this brokenness that I know I have, that I've brought to God, I've got to do something about it. If the opportunity comes, I'm going to say something about it. But now the opportunity is here, and he has to walk through his pre-decision, and he's terrified because how is the king going to respond? He says, long live the king. It's a good way to start. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. Nehemiah says, well, king, if you really want to know what's bothering me, your army sacked the city where my ancestors are. And it's got me down. It's destroyed. The gates are destroyed by fire and the walls are down. And he's terrified. What will the king say? But Nehemiah still steps out. Why does he step out? Why does he act? Because it would be easy for him to say, oh, I'm just having a bad day. I'm just feeling a little down. Oh, it's nothing, king. Because Nehemiah was acting on a pre-decision. Nehemiah had pre-decided that he was going to say something. He pre-decided that when the opportunity came, he was going to jump in and say something. And how does the king respond? The king asked, well, how can I help you out? How can I help you out? Nehemiah's courage to walk through what he pre-decided opens the door to help from the king. I am a big believer in pre-decisions. It's been such a helpful tool to me. In fact, I would say there's incredible power in pre-decision. I've used this a number of times in my life, and that's what Nehemiah did. He pre-decided that when the door opened, he was going to walk through it. When there came a time to say something, he was going to say it. A number of years ago, when I was a high school teacher, I had felt really broken and burdened for high school students. And I really wanted to make a difference in their lives, not just in the school setting, but I wanted to do it in a ministry setting. And what I did was I came to God and I was broken and I was weeping about it and I felt so burdened. And I said, God, if you ever open the door for me to do full-time ministry with students, I'm pre-deciding now that I will walk through it. 2.5 years later, I was in my teaching job and I was being set up for the future. I was getting the classroom I wanted. I was getting the courses I wanted. This career was going to be set up for good. And I got a phone call from a friend. That friend said, I'm calling. I know I live 6 hours away, but we've got a student ministry role here and I really want you to come and interview it and take it. And it would have been so easy for me to back off. Just like for Nehemiah, it would have been so easy to back off. But I walked into my pre-decision going, God, we've talked about this. We've pre-decided this. I'm walking through this as hard as this might be. And it changed the course and the trajectory of my life because I'd pre-decided. Pre-decision is so powerful. To pre-decide with your spouse that you're not going to go into a particular level of debt. To pre-decide as a high school student or somebody who's dating, pre-deciding to say, hey, I'm only going to go so far physically when it comes to a dating relationship that I'm in. There's power in pre-deciding what's next. And there's incredible power in pre-deciding when it comes to the brokenness in your life. Let me explain. To pre-decide that the next time you're alone with your spouse, that you're going to bring it up and say, you know what? I'm really struggling in our marriage, and I think you know that too. And pre-deciding you're going to pull the cork out of that bottle and begin that conversation. Pre-deciding that if you have the opportunity to have a conversation with that sister you're estranged from, that you are going to take it. To pre-decide that next week when that AA meeting rolls around, you're going to go back to AA. You're pre-deciding that that's going to happen. Pre-deciding the financial decision you are or are not going to make moving forward. Pre-deciding that you're going to sit down together before you spend another penny. There's power in pre-decision. Pre-deciding that the next time I feel anxious, if I'm dealing with this again, I'm going to tell somebody. I'm going to pick up the phone and call someone. I'm going to let people know that I'm struggling with anxiety so they can support me. There's so much power in pre-decision. To pre-decide that if the door opens up for you to help out in the area of human trafficking or to help out with the poor, to pre-decide that you're going to make that move. See, Nehemiah would say, rebuild step number 3 after brokenness and bringing it to God is to pre-decide your first move. That I'm going to take a step, that I'm going to move forward. See, sometimes our culture tells us lies to us and tells us by kind of naming our brokenness is fixing it. Sometimes we mistake naming brokenness for fixing it. People say, well, the first step is admitting you have a problem. But I think sometimes in our culture, we're told the only step is admitting we have a problem. It doesn't fix it. It just means we just name it. To name I'm struggling in my marriage, to name I'm struggling in my finances, to name I'm struggling with anxiety, to name I'm struggling with this or I'm broken for this, doesn't actually do anything in the long run about fixing it if we don't take the next step, if we don't pre-decide to make the next move. See, Nehemiah, when he was waiting for 4 months, he was actively waiting. So, see, we need to talk about passive waiting versus active waiting. And we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to share this with you. Passive waiting leads to inertia. Passive waiting is, I'm just going to wait till things change. I know I'm broken in this area. I know this relationship is broken. I know my decision-making pattern is broken, but I'm going to wait for it to change on its own. What does passive waiting look like? It looks like languishing. This is a word that we're hearing right now in the midst, as we're coming through the pandemic, in the midst of all the isolation, where you just don't feel motivated. And you just sit there in it. You don't do anything about it. You just passively are letting life happen to you. Numbing yourself instead of dealing with the brokenness from the abuse you suffered, instead of dealing with the brokenness that you feel in your relationship, instead of dealing with the brokenness that you're experiencing with someone at work, you just numb it. You numb it with Netflix, or you numb it with alcohol, or you numb it with something else that's inappropriate, or you're numbing it because by smoking up, whatever you're doing, you're numbing it. You're passively hoping it changes. You've named it, but you're just passive about it. Complacency. Phrases like, I know one day I need to. I know one day I will. One day I will call her. One day I will have the conversation. One day I will bring it up. That's passive waiting. But Nehemiah in his 4 months was actively waiting. He was anticipating. He was preparing. He says, when it happens, I'm ready to. When the door opens, I'm going for it. When I can have that conversation with that neighbor I know that's hurting, I'm going to have it. When I see them in the driveway, I'm going to do it. Pre-deciding what you're going to do. See, passive waiting, that leads to inertia, but active waiting, that's what leads to momentum. You're looking for the opportunity. You're pre-deciding. You're ready to walk through the door. You're ready to have the conversation. You're ready to take the action when the opportunity presents itself. Let me ask you a question. Where do you need to move from passive to active as you face your brokenness? Like Nehemiah, after weeping and after praying, pre-deciding your first move and standing up to act and saying, I'm going to move forward. And this is what you're going to see. This is amazing. You're going to see Nehemiah's first step, pre-decided step, go to a whole other level here. Watch this. Then he says, with a prayer to the God of heaven. So he shoots up like my friend calls it a flare prayer. You know, he's regularly talks to God, but here's hey God, boom, you got to help me with this. Here I go. And he said, I replied to the king, if it please the king, and if you're pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. You know the city that your army destroyed? Yeah, I want to go back actually and rebuild it. Could I do that? And what's the king going to say? I mean, he's sitting there wondering, what will the king do? How will he respond? And the king with the queen sitting beside him asked, well, how long will you be gone? When are you going to return? Nehemiah says, after I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. So man, you think, okay, wow, Nehemiah, you pre-decided you're going to say something. You pre-decided you were going to do something. You were ready to go, and then the king said, yes, you can go back to Jerusalem and rebuild it, and then you just ran out and did it, right? Nehemiah, you just went out and did it. Woo, I got step one. I pre-decided, it happened, I'm moving on. But that's not what happens. Nehemiah keeps going. Check this out. He says, well, I also said to the king, well, if it please the king, let me ask for something else. Let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of Euphrates, the Euphrates River, instructing them to let me travel safely through their territories and on my way to Judah. He says, hey, king, Could you also give me some letters so I can use your name with the local governors and the people who are there so I can have safe travel on the Euphrates River until I get there? I mean, can you give me that too? And then he says another thing. He says, and please give me, now this is as bold as it gets, please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him, tell him to give me timber. I'll need it to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, for the city walls, and for a house for myself. I mean, this is unbelievable. It's like Nehemiah is saying to him, you know what? I'm going to go rebuild the city that you destroyed and took, and I want you to pay for it. I'm going to build the wall, and another country is going to pay for it. We've heard that before, right? He's saying, I'm going to rebuild this, and I need the timber from you. Now, how is Nehemiah coming up with all this? I mean, he gets permission to go back, but then he goes, oh yeah, and I need these letters, and I'm going to need the timber, and I want you to tell the people they need to get me the timber. I want you to clear the way for me. I mean, he's just laying it out. Nehemiah's not coming up with this on the fly. He had a plan. See, he didn't just pre-decide when the opportunity came he would take it, but he already had a plan in place. Rebuild step 4 is create a specific plan. Know what your plan is. When you say, okay, I'm pre-deciding that I'm going to have that hard conversation that I need to have with a spouse, with a coworker, with my mom, what's the plan in that conversation? Maybe your plan is I'm going to own what's mine. And I'm not going to escalate, I'm going to de-escalate. I'm not going to raise my voice, I'm going to ask more questions. When I speak to my wife about our marriage, I'm going to be open to what she has to say. And I'm going to listen to her, and I'm going to own what I own, and I already know a list of counselors that can help me. That's creating a specific plan. I know that I'm going to reach out to this organization that works on human trafficking, and I'm going to donate financially, and then I'm going to ask them how I can volunteer. If they say I can volunteer, I'm going to make space on my calendar to do that. That's creating a specific plan. Not just the first step, but the steps after that. Not only do I recognize my anxiety, and not only is my first step to tell someone, but my step after that is to take a course on chronic anxiety, to meet with a counselor, to look for resources online, to take some specific steps, to meet with my doctor. Create a specific plan. And then this is what it says, and the king, he granted these requests because the gracious hand of God was on me. Nehemiah reminds us, if you're a follower of Jesus, his gracious hand is on you. That's such an incredible gift of being a follower of Jesus, is God's hand is on you. His Spirit is empowering you. It's not who you are, but who you trust in that makes the difference. That's what's so great about having a relationship with Jesus, is knowing that God's grace is on you, that he is with you, and that he's walking alongside you, and that he has a relationship with you, and that his Spirit is empowering you. Now, we don't have time to look at it today, but Nehemiah then travels back to Jerusalem after he's laid out his plan and got everything. He heads out to Jerusalem, and it's nighttime, and he's inspecting the walls and the gates, and he's not really letting anybody in on the plan yet. And then we pick it up here, and he says, and the city officials didn't know I'd been out there. He means out in the darkness, checking it out, or what I was doing, for I had not yet said anything to anyone about my plans. He wasn't broadcasting it to everyone. He wasn't broadcasting his plan or his pre-decision. He was working on it in the background. I know that's many of you. You're going to be working on your plan in the background. You and your spouse are going to be working on it. You might get some help. You're not broadcasting it to the world, but you're working on it along the way. He said, I had not yet spoken to the Jewish leaders, the priests, the nobles, the officials, anyone else in the administration. I hadn't said anything to anyone. But then he's ready. He says, but now I said to them, you know very well what trouble we're in. I mean, look around us. I mean, the gates are gone. The walls are down. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. He shows them how bad the situation is. But then he shows them a picture of what it could be. And he says this, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. Let's rebuild. Let's not stay broken. Let's be a different kind of nation. Let's end this disgrace. Let's rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. And he says, then I told them about how the gracious hand of God had been on me, and about the conversation I had with the king, and how I pre-decided and I stepped out and I laid out the plan, and the king said yes, and it's unbelievable. He just paints this incredible picture for them. See, it's not enough just to create a specific plan. You got to cast a bold vision for yourself. Create a specific plan and cast a bold vision. To look ahead and say, my marriage where it is now, I know it could be in a better place. And I'm creating a picture of what that could be. What God could do in my marriage. What God could do with my anxiety. What God could do in the midst of my relationship with my parent. What God could do as I step out and I work in the area of child poverty. What is the vision, the picture of what God could do? Now, why do you want to do that? Because a picture isn't instant perfection. I think that's one of the mistakes we make. If you have the picture, it will happen. That's not what I'm talking about. But a vision isn't instant perfection. It's a picture of a preferred destination. Because hard days are going to come. Because if I told you that, if you pre-decide, you bring it to God and you pre-decide and you make a plan that's just all going to go smoothly, I'm not talking about real life. Real life is there's going to be bumps, there's going to be turns, there's going to be hills, there's going to be valleys, there's going to be relapses, there's going to be arguments, there's going to be all these things. But you need that picture of the preferred destination of a life that's healed and a God that's present with you to remind yourself on those days, those difficult days, that we're rebuilding the wall and that disgrace is no longer with me and healing is going to take place in my life as I walk with God and work out my plan. And then you notice what Nehemiah does. He gets all these officials and nobles and priests. What he does is he's getting the right people around him. That's the last step. Get the right people around you. Get people in your life. People you can trust, people you can count on, people who are going to walk alongside you. It doesn't have to be a lot of people, but just get the right people around you. Don't go through rebuilding alone. Nehemiah knew he couldn't do it alone. In fact, in chapter 3, there's this incredible picture. There's this incredible picture in chapter 3 where you see the people rebuilding the wall. And it's people from all different ethnicities and all different professions and all different economic backgrounds. And they're all building the wall together. Some theologians say it's the picture of what the early church was going to look like. That he got all the right people rallied around the vision. And for your issue, maybe that's a lot of people. For what you want to rebuild, maybe that's a lot of people. But maybe for you, it's a few people. But get the right people around you. I mean, that's our vision as we relaunch our church, 400 volunteers. We want to get you, the right people around us. I can't do it myself. Our staff, we can help, but it takes everyone to move through our relaunch and to reach more people with the hope of Jesus, getting the right people around us. And then he says this, so they began the good work. I love this. They began the good work. What's the good work of rebuilding you want to see God do in your life? This is what I want you to do. We've talked about brokenness and then bringing it to God. Letting that brokenness break your heart, bring it to God. And then here's the last 3 steps from today. Decide your first move. What are you going to do? Maybe for you, you've got a neighbor and you're thinking, man, my neighbor needs to know the hope of Jesus. And we're hosting Alpha this fall, an environment you can invite them to both in person and online. And maybe you're pre-deciding that you're going to invite your friend to that. You're going to invite your neighbor to that. You know they've got spiritual questions and they would want to go with you and participate in that with you. Maybe that's your first move. Maybe your first move is a hard conversation. Maybe your first move is a financial decision that you need to make. And then have a specific plan and vision. Find the right people around you. And you can't do this on your own. God wants to do it with you. And the grace of God is on your life. Now, as you carry out this plan, you're going to have opposition, you're going to have discouragement, and that's what we're going to talk about next week. Let me pray for you. God, we come to you today as we look to rebuild areas of our lives in us and around us. Pray that you would give us the courage and the strength, not just to bring our brokenness to you, but to start to take steps to move forward so that we could realize the vision you have for our lives, that you who began a good work in us will be faithful to complete it, and that we will have life in that area of our lives to the full. We pray this in your name. Amen.